Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, brought to you by TechStrong and Plutora. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of TechStrong Learning. We have an exciting presentation ahead, but first, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, or you'd just like to share it with a friend, the on-demand will be made available shortly after we conclude today's webinar. If you have any questions for our speakers, we want you to direct those to the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen, and we'll save some time at the end of the presentation to get to those questions. If you have any comments or you would just like to let us know from where you're tuning in, we want you to put those into the chat tab. We'll try to engage with you there, and we'll keep the Q&A tab just for the questions. And we will have a few polls during today's webinar, 2 to be exact. And our slides are currently downloadable via the Handouts tab, which can also be found on the right side of your screen. So if you'd like to follow along that way, go ahead and download that now. At the conclusion of our webinar, we will have a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So stick around to see if you're one of our winners. So on to our topic today. It is accelerating continuous testing with test environment management. And I'm joined today by Marc Hornbeek, Principal Consultant and author of Engineering DevOps, and Bob Davis, Chief Marketing Officer for Plutora. And it is my pleasure at this point in time to turn the floor over to Bob. Thank you both so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, Cody. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today. We are super excited about this topic. It is a topic that we were chatting in the beginning is one of the most pragmatic topics that we see on these webinars. You know, this is a real interesting problem in the course of DevOps and software delivery. Mark is an expert in this, having spent several decades in and out of testing and working on this. It's a real Achilles heel of your process, and we think that if you look at this, understand it, adopt some of the principles, you are on your way to solving some serious delivery flow problems with your delivery process. Mark, let's go ahead and get started. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you for inviting me, Bob and Cody, for the opportunity to participate in this webinar. I'm really grateful, to be a partner with Plutora for more than 4 years. I think this is an important story to tell about test environments.
It is an important
story. Industry. Yeah.
It is an important story. One you highlighted in a book you've written recently as well. Isn't that right, Mark?
Yeah. My book's basically a practical approach to help you do DevOps better, but there's a lot of hints and tips and tools in there. That's also on the related website to help you with, doing test environments better and understanding how to apply that to QA, DevOps, DevSecOps, SRE situations.
Well, it covers a lot of really hot, important topics that are top of mind for our audience and for people out there. I think if you haven't given it a look, the offer is available now as a pop-up on your screen. And if you haven't read it, you should read it. It covers a lot of things, including continuous testing, which we're going to be talking more about today. In fact, Mark, in the course of this webinar, we're going to cover a lot of really important things. It's a very important story to tell, as you said earlier. Why don't you kind of do a quick summary of some of the things people are going to learn today, Mark?
There's a lot of lessons, and we're going to have to run through this pretty quick, unfortunately, because there is so much involved in testing that people often don't understand. But, what are the bottlenecks caused by inadequate test engineering? And I really emphasize the word engineering a lot, maybe because I'm an engineer, but, testing is really an engineering problem, not just something artful thing you do after development. We'll learn about how test environment management solutions can help you with addressing those issues. Talk about some tools and some assessment capabilities for determining your own test environment needs and tool solutions, and provide you a methodology to roadmap a solution to help you get successful with test environments and test environment management.
Truly, and I think it really is, as I mentioned earlier, very pragmatic. I mean, this is a situation where adopting some of the principles and thoughts and ideas that we're going to chat about today that Mark is going to highlight, 30 days from now, you could be better off than you are today. It's that actionable. So let's dig in a little bit and talk about, let's talk about the agenda and get on with things. We're going to start and talk a little bit about continuous testing, and Mark will go through that. This is a big, important area. I think this is a huge part of the story, and And I'm fascinated by it every time. And from there, we can shift into some of the capabilities. We can talk about how they can directly affect a positive change to accelerate your not only your testing, but ultimately the flow of value to your customers. And then start to look very pragmatically. What do you how do you assess where you are? And how do you get on the bandwagon to start actually applying this and taking advantage to becoming a hero in terms of reducing some serious waste and increasing the value and delivery to your customers? So we can do that and then ultimately learn more about environment management. And we'll be having time for questions at the end. So let's get on with it. Mark, how big is the problem?
Yeah, so here's where my passion really starts to show, I think, because, the industry doesn't really say enough about testing, in my opinion. People assume too much, oversimplify the problem. Testing tends to be, it's a lot more than just performing tests. There was an influential book called The Art of Software Testing written in the 1970s. It was wrong, in my opinion, some of the key tenets. The book says that testing is something that requires independent people to perform instead of engineering work that smart developers can do. On many levels, that's been proven to be incorrect. And unfortunately, that's caused the industries to relegate test engineering work to lower classes of activities. In my opinion, that needs to be corrected. And this webinar hopefully will help you understand why I say that. There's generally a need for more visibility around testing. You can't improve what you don't measure. Testing is what provides the data for visibility when you talk about pipelines and software delivery methods, and for that matter, production as well.
Well, for sure, and the continuous testing mantra is out there. There's been some research on it. The World Quality Report, which a lot of people refer to, we're going to make a few comments on, but the real cost of software failures is pretty significant. I mean, there's some big numbers on here, Mark.
Yeah. So there's some good industry reports out there around quality and testing. I do like the annual work quality reports. Also, the Undo report that was published here corresponds pretty well with my own experiences. 88% reported they're doing continuous integration, which is a strong indicator how much continuous integration, continuous delivery pipelines are being practiced and adopted, and adoption is increasing across industries. But what's most concerning is the 26% of developers' time being wasted on ineffective testing. That's equating, in the calculation they're doing in the report, to $1.6 trillion of lost revenue value. And I actually believe that's real. If you think about 26% of waste across development processes across all industries, that's huge. It's easily that kind of number. So clearly this underestimates, this undermines the need to, have an opportunity for improvement.
For sure. I mean, I saw some predictions over the size of the IT budget in 2022, and that would represent close to 20% of that budget. So, I mean, it's just amazing to see 20% failures based on this one aspect. Of course, it's bigger than just one aspect, isn't it, Mark? It kind of permeates through the whole thing and really depends on, environments. I mean, where do you do the testing? And this was interesting with so many people, indicating that enhancing their test environments was really a core to their success in this area. Would you agree with that? Do you see some interesting trends here, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, it's really not surprising to me. Roughly half indicate test environment provisioning solutions are important to making their test environments more efficient. I mean, combining that number with my own estimation that testing is roughly half of the work of any engineering process, a little math can tell you that improving test environments can improve 26% of, 25% of overall efficiencies, which correlates well with the 26% in the prior chart. That tells you that, major test solutions, like listed on the chart here, are really, practical ways of getting a lot of gains.
Yeah.
So, cloud solutions, setting up environments, and all of the things listed here are major opportunities, actually.
Yeah, we're going to dive into that now. I think I had an interesting conversation with Dr. Jim Scheidmeyer over at Gartner, and his comment was, and he's in the testing area of Gartner. And one of the comments he made is people call up wanting to know more about the automated testing tools and the actual act of automated testing. And his first question is, well, do you have a stable, understood, well-orchestrated test environment strategy? And the answer is invariably no. And it's like, well, why are you worried about automated tools if you don't have a stable, constant place to run them? So that's really the crux of it. So let's dive into that, and see what those problems really are. Let's enlighten everybody and see where we are, Mark. This is the first element, really requiring that shift left to bring the testing closer to the developer, I would imagine, right, Mark? Or what would you say?
Yeah, exactly. Everybody talks about continuous testing, shift left, which is certainly an important tenet of DevOps and improvements. But literally, shifting left is kind of nonsense in some ways. It's not sufficient, at least. You can't shift left all tests to the beginning of the value stream. So you really need to have the ability to stand up test environments and do testing efficiently, strategically along the entire value stream. Some tests really do have to be done near the end or even in production. As you get more accelerated test pipelines, you're going to need to have really good testing all the way through the value stream.
Well, in fact, the tests vary, right? I mean, the test requirements vary depending on where you are as well.
Yeah. So in this chart, basically, indicates there's really no one size fits all for test environments. Different types of tests require different types of environments. Small functional test environments are required for every developer. System testing requires fewer environments but more extensive environments. Performance and capacity testing may need massive test environments for some short time in order to validate the performance of an entire system.
Yeah, and of course they're required because that's where the repairs are detected and dealt with.
Exactly. So, here you're talking about an often forgotten problem that, really, any one test and any one test result potentially has to go through an entire process of setting up test environments multiple times to, determine the problem, find the problem, diagnose the problem, fix the problem, verify the problem, fix. So in other words, it's not a linear process as implied by oversimplified left to right pipeline drawings. In the real world, there's lots of loops of activities, each of which are a source of bottlenecks that require test environments.
And all those loops are going on in different test environments at the same time across different spots in the development, life cycle. So, and I would imagine that managing that can be quite a bit of a headache.
Yes, so even the richest organizations can't afford to have complete dedicated test environments for every developer. There's a need to share expensive resources needed for testing between many people. You really need to have efficient tooling to help avoid the problem of waiting and having bottlenecks of people waiting for shared environments.
Yeah, these shared environments are expensive. You mentioned that, but millions of dollars in some cases to represent the load in the environments where these applications actually live. That's a lot of resource to tie up in a shared environment if it's not efficiently managed.
Exactly.
So that's a huge one and comes into play a lot of times. And then of course continuous delivery. I mean, you need that. Continuous implies uninterrupted, right?
Yeah. So in addition to just the people waiting, in a continuous delivery tool chain, you've got a lot of automation. So now the automated tools need to also have access to testing, and standing up tools in an automated pipeline. It's very much like the people. You're going to have wait states in the tooling and the automation if you don't have an ability to automate resource sharing of the shared pool of test resources. So again, test environment management becomes a critical factor in optimizing continuous delivery pipelines as well.
And that wait state is significant. I mean, that we've talked to customers that have had 30 days delays in terms of setting up and provisioning a environment for a particular test group. Imagine that, 30 days.
Well, frankly, one of my what I call one of my greatest hits of automation had to do with that. It's a longer story, but way back in the days of building test environments for networks, it was massive. It was that kind of time to set up some testing. The testing themselves would take maybe a couple of days, but setting up the environments was the bigger part of the problem. And in many ways, that's still true for complex topologies of testing that we'll talk about.
Well, and the needs change. It's a continuous source of investment to be able to keep up with the loads and environments that are necessary to have in the environment to test the actual code against.
Yeah, I mean, that example I mentioned, when we automated the test environment setup, we could prove that it saved $90 million a quarter for that organization. It was a big organization, but still, there's a lot of value in doing this. So, but it required, some justification and investment. People were skeptical. So this is a topic near and dear to my heart. chronically too many business managers don't really understand how important test investment is to their whole budget, and they sometimes gloss over it only to assume the engineering managers are going to take care of it somehow within their budgets, and then that doesn't get handled very well. So engineering teams do have a role to play in making sure the cost and budget requirements are made visible, so that there's not underinvestment in that. Test management systems have a role to play in helping make that data visible.
Yeah, and we'll talk more in a few minutes about some of the other newer technologies that are coming out to, microservices and cloud environments. But does the fact that those are on the horizon, if not here today, does that change any of this requirement from your perspective, Mark?
Sure. I mean, the modern applications are no longer just big legacy pipelines. There's many parallel microservices that are potentially interconnected, and all of them have their own set of test requirements. And there's a little bit of a myth we'll talk about regarding the independence of those things. When you get to system level, you really need to have a real confidence that the whole system's going to work. So you need to be able to set up test environments to validate that.
And those virtual environments are working with on-premises environments in the real world anyway. So there's a lot of so we'll talk about that. But the question came in, well, maybe this problem isn't as big if I go all virtual. And I think the point is like, well, not really. That doesn't really solve the problem, and we're not really there yet anyway.
Yeah, you need to be able to orchestrate across the dedicated and hybrid and cloud environments in order to build a real world system for testing.
Yeah, and along the way, make sure you keep current on all your governance and compliance matters, which are top of mind for many of the folks that we're talking to that are looking at evolving their transformation to higher levels.
Yeah, I mean, governance at the speed of DevOps really requires automation. You cannot keep paperwork running fast enough for governance, security, regulatory, other compliance and audit requirements. I mean, you just can't do it. You really need, and this is also one of the benefits of DevOps, right? If you automate things, you're going to get more automated record keeping. But if you don't do that, then it's going to be a big bottleneck just to get the audit evidence.
So we have the need to start testing earlier and more often and throughout the dev cycle. We have the different tests that are required there, the investments to keep those things up and running, the need to keep current on compliance, the need to be able to administer these and make these available quickly. I mean, this is an administration nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. And developers they're not running alone. They need help from time to time. They're going to need to reach out for support. The ticket systems tend to be a little bit slow, but in response, so you really need to have test environment capabilities built in with self-support, automated response systems built in to avoid long wait times. Otherwise, when you run into issues, you need to be able to reach out for help. And these test environments are complex.
And so this is all happening while I'm trying to develop. But where did the tests come from? I mean, the tests themselves are a part of this equation as well.
Yeah, so certainly good quality software depends on good testing. Tests don't appear out of nowhere. Creating effective new tests for features is an ongoing need for the life of the software. Developers and QA need test environments to design, develop, test, maintain well-engineered tests and test environments themselves. So that's another resource requirement that can be bottlenecked if you don't have it.
Absolutely. So, we have to manage it, create it, and, now we need to see what's going on. We need visibility into what's happening within those tests and across all the complexities in the fabric that we've been talking about.
Yeah, so the whole point of testing, I mean, frankly, nobody cares about testing per se. It's really the results that you want out of testing, because testing in itself is kind of a non-value add activity, but you want to do it efficiently so that you can get to the results real quick. And that means that the test environment data configurations and results have to be available readily to optimize the test analysis process. Otherwise, that's yet another testing bottleneck.
Yeah, and then if that isn't enough, and this goes back to the comment we were talking about with going to automated testing and trying to do more of that in the face of not having reliable test environments. I think the quality signal becomes a real big problem, and this is something that I think people underestimate.
Yeah, one of the biggest sources of frustration And waste, frankly, occurs if the test environment is not stable. Instability of the test environment forces the need to repeat an entire suite of tests potentially. So, you basically waste the whole test cycle if the test environment is not stable.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before. The notion of saying, okay, if I take an automated test and run it 20 times, I should get the same answer 20 times.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of people that execute that and are not able to, maintain that level of purity relative to the test results is staggering. Very important problem there to understand and deal with.
Yeah, repeatability of the testing is just as important as stability.
I mean, we talked
you got
about
to rely on the result.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the cost of testing that we talked earlier that the World Quality Report talked about. That didn't even really take into account the damage done in the market from a product that carries with it defects that are unacceptable to the user base relative to customer satisfaction. The delivery of value is undermined by the quality or the fragility of the code. It's a very significant issue, and it can be pretty public if it results in a security breach or fatality. In the sense of, remember the Boeing scenario. So there's a lot of danger here if this isn't done well.
Exactly.
All right. So here's your repeatability. We commented on that. So, now we are in a world where, maybe 10 years ago, that was predominantly an on-premises world. Today, we hear a lot about that changing. Let's chat a little bit about the different topologies. And while that brings some real interesting answers and solutions to certain problems, it complicates the matter at some level as well. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so modern systems are highly distributed, consisting of ephemeral, core edge data resources deployed over real cloud infrastructures and edge devices. So the complexity and variability of these distributed systems require sophisticated test environment setups and management. Otherwise, you're going to be bottlenecked just trying to put it all together to do a test.
Yeah, and I do hear from people, as we move into this world of hybrid of clouds or microservices, these problems are going to reduce, and I'm not seeing that in practice. I mean, we ran a study and a survey with analyst firm Enterprise Management Associates a year ago or so, and found that something like 70% of the environments were still on premises in the Fortune 2000. The classic organizations, the banks, the insurance, the telcos of the world that are looking to transition, to transform themselves digitally, have a tremendous amount of legacy, adopting new technologies, bringing this all in, and at some level, there's this promise that they get to the point where there's they get to this independent microservice, and that's kind of this, I don't know, holy grail that they're reaching for. Is that a myth, Mark? Is that a real thing, or is that not going to happen?
Yeah, so I call it out as a myth from a testing point of view. I mean, modern applications architected as containerized microservices do provide a lot of flexibility in terms of design and flexibility of architectures and services, which is, I think, the main benefit of it. That's why you want to do it. But in theory, each microservice can be developed, deployed, scaled independently. But from a testing point of view, that's really a myth. In reality, real services consisting of all these microservices must be configured and tested as a group of interconnected services to verify the operation and performance of the total system. You wouldn't want to deploy a new microservice without testing it as an integral part of a system.
Absolutely, and I think that the interactions and dependencies associated with all those components of the value stream really are not getting more simple. They're getting more complicated, and with the backdrop of this is every company is becoming a software company. That if you went to bed as a traditional brick and mortar company, woke up as a software company sometime over the last few years, and getting this under control is one of the easiest, lowest hanging fruits to solving the problem. And then ultimately you've got to, move from here and get it deployed.
Absolutely.
This is a big deal.
Yeah. So there's a lot of additional use cases for this, but this is a critical one to maybe finish on. The test bottlenecks around deployment. Modern systems do you can't test everything within a short DevOps cycle. There's just not enough time. The faster you deliver, the faster you're going to get, deliver to production, and you can't, some types of tests are going to need to be done in production. So using some of the sophisticated deployment strategies like, blue, green, canary, feature flag deployments and so on need to be accommodated. They do need to be tested as well. And you need test environments that can work with that stuff to make sure that you're going to have a smooth deployment strategy. So the test environment capabilities need to be efficient enough to support those strategies too.
Well, and this is where the rubber meets the road, because this is where you actually start to inject instability into the production environment. So, the all eyes are on this process. So it's kind of a big deal. So,
yeah.
All right. So we've talked about the test environments. We've talked about, the many problems from administering them and managing multiple different test environments with dependencies that cover different topologies, that some are, microservices, some are on premises. I've got compliance and governance. I've got I've got lots of stuff going on. How do I, what's the next step, Mark, as I start to look? You have this process that you've worked out at Engineering DevOps. Want to walk the audience through this a little bit?
Yeah, there were 15 use cases that we just went through. There's actually even more, to be complete. Yeah. We didn't talk about security cases and other things that we could have talked about, but still, it gives you the idea. Test environments are really, really important. This slide essentially just explains a little tool that I have. You can download it from my website for free. It shows the use cases. You can use it to score your own situation of what's important in each of those use cases, what's your current practice. It'll compute a little gap score. If you get a gap of more than 2.5, the way the algorithm works, that's going to tell you that improving test environments is a major opportunity for you, and you probably should really give it some serious priority and attention. That's really all this slide does. You can come up with your own tool. It's not rocket science, but it's a simple approach to help you understand, what are your own test environment requirements and how important is the problem to you.
Yeah, and based on the experience we have, when we get literally probably a third of the people that come to our website, and we have a lot of people coming to our website every month. I would say literally a third of them are coming in saying, this is an area I need to get better at. I need to improve. This is true low-hanging fruit to improve my development process. We see that a lot. So I suspect that the gap of 2.5 is more common than not. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, just in my own consulting, I'd say about half of the pipelines and clients I work with, I would rate this as really, really important. And half is a big number.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
In fact, it's time for a poll now. I think it's good timing to get to the poll. And there we go. So just kind of looking at to what extent the test environments are a bottleneck today, and the answer is just pick one, anything from you really don't know. It's an area where you're just kind of starting out with, all the way to, gee, we don't have any bottlenecks. Some significant, or boy, it's just everywhere. So let's look at what this looks like for you. What would you expect to see, Mark?
I think about half are going to say it's really important. That's just, again, my experience. We'll see.
Well, so we've got, these are coming in, in real time, which I think is kind of cool as an aside. I think this is always really interesting. I think, 43% are, this is a real problem either. Well, look at that, Mark. It's 79%. Well, 75%. Somewhere in that 3/4 area, at least one, if not multiple stages, there's a big problem.
Yeah, probably we have a biased audience here that are interested in this topic, I suppose. So it's probably more than half, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's consistent with what we see. And so let's talk about how we solve this problem. We can close this out. And I mean, I think, I'm glad that, you're at the right place. So Mark, let's talk a little bit, let's talk about the solution and how it actually solves the problem. So
yeah, so I actually, been involved in test environment management solutions for a long time. Test environment management is basically a class of solutions to address the different test environment use cases that we described in the prior slides, and that provide capabilities to manage, configure, make visible all the resources needed for testing. Essentially provides a wrapper around testing. Includes the ability to integrate applications, tools, infrastructures at all stages in a value stream. And that way you can essentially, provide orchestration and visibility to all things testing. If you don't have a test environment management system, frankly, you don't have the controls you need to understand what's going on with testing. So I really strongly recommend people give this attention, give it priority, invest in a test environment system, because it's going to have a massive effect on your overall pipeline performance for all your different pipelines.
When I was a test engineer many moons ago, it was really all about that last part, that pre-production. Before stuff goes into production, we need to test it. The notion that test environments are needed every step of the way is and as we've discussed, when they're needed in different parts of the value stream, the kinds of tests, the kinds of dependencies, the kinds of interaction, kinds of access, the kinds of reporting, it's all unique to those areas to get right to the heart of the matter, solve the problem, and move on, so that we're fixing problems very close to where they were inserted into the system in terms of the bug. So that's a key thing. So this is huge, and it was a big eye opener for me a few years ago when we started to see test environment management as a key interest point for the Plutora solution. Mm-hmm. And first of all, people are using a lot of tools in their value stream, in their testing. They fit right into the approach with environment management, though, right, Mark? I mean, they integrate right in, and the reporting is pretty incredible.
Well, this is the key thing, and all these modern pipelines are consisting of many tools, and any one CI/CD pipeline is typically 15 to 25 tools, depending on whether you're adding in a lot of security checks and different things. But fundamentally, one of the first steps is to determine which tools are in your tool chain. Make sure your test environment management solution has the ability to integrate with those specific tools. Since you really want to have a consistent solution to work for all the different stages in the pipeline, it makes sense to start the solution with satisfying the needs of the development end, and then work your way to the right as you build out the solution to more complex test topologies.
Yeah, I think that's a key one, and one of the important elements of being able to actually see what's going on inside the environments. What applications, what versions of the tool, that sort of thing. That's pretty critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So talk to me about continuous test automation, Mark. This is the integration of human and automated. This is a big topic.
Right. So there's, other than just integrating tools, I mean, there's a lot of very specific features that your test environment management solution needs to have to be effective in this world of continuous testing. It's important that the solutions have capability to support workflows for testing that also integrate well with all the other pipeline workflows for builds and packaging and all the different things that are going on, deployments. So they need to integrate not just with the tools, but the different processes and workflows. Some of those are human people interactions, and some of them are machine processes, but all of that, it needs to be very, programmable, if you like, and amenable to automation and different workflow styles, scheduling capabilities, resource change request capabilities, provisioning, configuration capabilities, deployment, making sure everything is visible. These are features that are basically table stakes, I would say, for any kind of real TEM system. If you're considering any TEM system, make sure that these are at least the minimum capabilities available.
Now, Mark, as you talk to your clients, and as you are in the market, you do a lot of training, you do a lot of presenting, you do a lot of consulting on this topic.
Yeah.
Is this an area where people are struggle with? I mean, how would you describe the state of confidence in this?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, I'm working with a client right now. We're going through a massive lift and shift on continuous integration, and they're nervous about the testing part of it, because that's in some ways the hard part. But TEM solutions are a way to help, simplify it and get a handle on it a lot easier. Testing is complex. Nobody said it's easy. It's often the most complex part of the process. So you really need help. And this is where TEM solutions are there, right? Take advantage of them. Don't be shy. Don't avoid the problem just because it's tough.
Yeah, and I think the various solutions really apply themselves to this. So some of them on here, you want to cover some of the solutions here for continuous test environment management.
Yeah, so there's the better TM systems have some advanced capabilities. Being able to do health checks in parallel with testing is important because of, like we said before, the reliability, stability of the test environment itself is something to watch for. Being able to very efficiently release and restore the different deployment environments, having sophisticated usage reports that will help you justify investments and keep track of how things are being used and make changes to your deployment of the TEM itself. Having capacity and utilization and planning capabilities, same kind of thing. Make sure the test environment itself is under control with change management, and that any costs are tracked and any chargebacks. If you have an organization where depends on if you're offering TM as a service, for example, in an organization, you want to be able to keep track of who's using what for chargeback purposes, typically in a big organization. So there's a lot of sophisticated capabilities that if you really want to be picking the best in class TM solutions, make sure that they have these type of features as well.
Yeah, I think this is key. We see a few real key kind of pain points, if you will, that come into this from our perspective. With all of this in mind, one of the very first things problems they have is they don't know what's available. Mm-hmm. They don't have visibility into even what test environments are there. What configurations are open to them. So it's an Easter egg hunt every time you set out to try to get those resources available to you. Is that something you see, Mark? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, I go all the way back to one of my opening statements, right? I think there was a disservice done. The testing wasn't given priority in the industry. It's been relegated to kind of a second class of activities, and that was a mistake. It's not taught that well in schools. It's not part of the engineering curriculum that much. It's only when you go out into industry and you start to realize, wait a minute, there's this big thing called testing. So having good tools like good TM tools will really help you, and don't be afraid of it. It's the tools will help make up for the lack of training and exposure. They'll help a lot.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's getting the visibility, the ability to see it on a schedule and understand the dependencies, the ability to make sure the configurations are correct, the ability to change them when you inherit a test environment so that the requirements and configurations match what you're doing. These are all critical components, and in fact, you have a assessment tool, if you will, to look at the capabilities. Also on your website, maybe we dive into this just a little bit, Mark.
Yeah, it's a similar idea. There's no rocket science here. It's a simple little tool. Same approach. List out the different capabilities you need in your test environment. Score them. How important are those? What's the capability of the tool? You can use this tool to basically determine the priority of your own TEM tool features and compare to other solutions when selecting TM solutions. So it's a simple tool. You're welcome to download it or add to it. It's available for download for free. But I use this kind of approach for many things in my consulting assessments and so on, just to help people understand not only what are the attributes you're looking for, but how important are they in scoring. Too many of the assessment tools out there just assume that you want to get to the ultimate capability. Not necessarily. What's important in your environment is always part of the moderator in the question before you compute a gap score. So really what you want to focus on are where do you have gaps in the computation of importance and capability. Both are critical for your selections.
Yeah, I think that and we're this last part of the dialogue here that we've got for the webinar really talks about how do you take advantage, how do you get started, how do you what's the right way to use your individual roadmap to get control of your test environment situation. One of the things that's required there is a lingua franca, is a method, is a language to talk to management about about getting approval, about getting, showing the ROI or whatever it is that you need to do to say, hey, look, this is important. We need to invest in this, and it's going to change our lives relative to software delivery. That's a key. And so we actually have a survey here that we can open up and then kind of use to chat about what it takes to actually get into into management, get the approvals, and start moving forward to solve this problem. So, Cody, why don't you go ahead and open up that poll? There we go. So this is the question to, what do you need to provide management to get that and to get that? And look at that. It's pretty even so far. ROI is always a big one. Interesting. Okay. I think ROI is gonna come out on top. It's interesting. Of all the solutions I've been involved with almost my entire career, the ROI on environment management is one of the most obvious ones to set up. Do you get into that discussion a lot, Mark, as far as what's the ROI here? I mean, how do you overcome this objection from management that says, hey, maybe it's not a big problem, why do we need to do this?
Right. So uninformed business managers often say, yeah, of course the ROI is high. You can show me the ROI, but I have other things I need to do. So you really need to have a compelling ROI case that's based on data that when they turn to the CFO says, yeah, I agree, this is a real ROI case. So make sure that you're basing your ROI data on real assessment data, on real, hard data. Otherwise, you get into other conversations. But I agree, ROI is really key. I've written some articles on how test data is really the core of a lot of DevOps business cases. You need to make sure that your ROI is, above the threshold of what the organization expects to see in any investment case. If you do that properly, then indeed ROI can be a strong, way to get investment in this.
We did a study on that, and the information is available on our website. And it's a report done by EMA, again, I'll reference, and they did a survey of folks and came out with the notion that at the enterprise level, the average number of releases a year was 76. That sounded low to me, but in the population that they went through, the average number was 76. Even with that, the amount of money that they would be able to save was $1.4 million a year, even with 76 releases. When you start to go up from there, you're talking about multi-million dollars of savings. That's just the efficiency side of it, let alone the opportunity to deliver value faster and the benefits of customer satisfaction and either revenue or cost avoidance, depending on what the application is, are really extreme. And so understanding your roadmap and getting into where you want to go is a big deal. And you have some tools for this. This is actually the topic of an entire webinar, this one slide, which we've kind of, brought all down to one page. Mark, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about what the roadmap might look like for someone.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully by now in this webinar, you've got the idea that test environments are really, really important to your pipelines, and getting, good TM solutions will help accelerate your quality assurance and DevOps transformations. This slide basically says what are the key steps, right? I mean, first of all, get everybody aligned around this. So the webinar itself is not a bad way to do that. To inform people, make sure that you got the right leadership involved, sponsorship, getting their teams aligned around the need to accelerate continuous testing. You can use this talk to help. You can then use the tools I gave to help you discover the current state of your test environment requirements, or something equivalent is fine. Choose a TM solution using the tool, the other tool that we presented is a way to help you do that. Pick an application to use as a model, try it, actually calculate the benefits using a model application. I don't recommend you boil the ocean. Start with, select an application to try it with. operationalize that solution, get the data, get metrics, prove the value, and then once you do, then you're at the point where you can expand it to other applications across the organization. So it's a simple stepwise approach. Unfortunately, I find too many people want to jump in the middle without proper preparation and alignment. It causes confusion. You're better off to follow these logical steps, and that way you're going to get to the end a lot faster.
Yeah, I think like anything, I think that this is a situation where it's start with a specific use case, solve that, understand the value, and move from there.
Yep.
So where's your greatest pain? And again, I think we find at a very fundamental level, one of the first problems is, hey, I don't know what's available.
Yep.
It's hard for me to sort it all out when I need it. It's a new project every time. That seems to be a big one. And then just scheduling it, just understanding what's available and when it will be available, and having visibility into that. Having an image, a picture of where the dependencies are. One environment might be dependent on another environment relative to the flow and just the overall testing hierarchy. And then the configuration management. That's a big one. Not only to make sure the artifacts of software and hardware and whatnot are at the appropriate level and the right version to represent what would actually be seen, but also just to understand, what you need to do to be able to finish the tests and be able to, manage it. And it's a huge problem. And I think that this is key. This is key. Okay, so with that in mind, then, Mark, we've got let's just kind of start to wrap it up. Make sure we covered everything.
Yeah. So a word of caution, there's a lot of tests or a lot of tools fatigue out there. Every tool vendor comes along and they want to sell their tool, but this is different, right? This is truly something that can make a huge difference for a relatively little investment and a lot of practical value across the entire pipeline. So this is why to me, I'm passionate about this topic, because I have seen it when people really embrace test environment management. You can show value really fast, and the ROI is really high. So having said that, how do you get your hands on things? Make sure that you do understand test environments are a key source of bottlenecks. And there's an opportunity to accelerate continuous testing by reducing those bottlenecks, investing in test management solutions, test environment management solutions. You can easily justify them. The assessment models in the talk will help. Follow a logical roadmap to get there. Don't jump to the end. If you follow the roadmap, you're going to find that it's a smooth process. So I really encourage anyone listening to think hard about this and get going with really understanding your own test environment requirements and test management solutions. And I'd love to hear the results of that later on when you've succeeded.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the points on the slide about what's required to secure investment was case studies and whatnot, and we have a number of them. The company that we referred to that was looking at a 30-day, setup time and provisioning time for their environments, reduced that down to a couple hours using a tool, and that's not an uncommon kind of gain. We see that quite a bit. In fact, it's really not just passionate to Mark, but passionate to Plutora. We have a important product component in our offering. On the screen, there's a couple things. First of all, there's an ebook that was written by none other than our friend here, Marc Hornbeek. Mark, you have a couple comments on this?
Yeah, I think this also is a good value add, just to help people understand test environments in more logically, and it's a good value add. I think would help educate people that you feel you need to educate to start building up the investment case in TEM.
Yeah,
yourself.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing people wanting to. There's with the last couple of years, there's been a tremendous amount of emphasis on transforming hybrid work. understanding what's available to get better collaboration in a world of, distributed teams and distributed teammates. The pandemic has changed the way we work, and people have been doing a lot of research and study to understand where to go next. And what we're seeing is people are saying, okay, I've done that. I want to see capabilities. I saw a great quote the other day that people are willing or interested in exchanging education for capabilities. So where are the things that they can invest in from a capability point of view to have the biggest advantage? How do they take advantage of all of the research and learnings that they've done to address the key pain points? And environment management is a huge one. I mentioned something like a third of the people come to Plutora looking for that. This picture on the screen, just to give you a sense of who we are, if you don't know, this is an overall picture of our entire platform. So this involves everything from the planning side on the left all the way to production. So there's your value stream management view of idea to production. There's a lot of reporting capabilities on the top. There's integration into your tool chain. We sit on top of any tool you happen to have across that entire flow. And then we provide that orchestration, kind of an action layer in the middle. And what we've been talking about today is right in the middle of that picture, the hybrid environment management. And really highlighting that you don't need, not only can you start in test environment management at one spot and evolve, but then that'll take you to a full, digital transformation as you continue to move on and extend your capabilities to other areas of value stream and value stream management. But this test environment management piece is really significant, so much so that we actually just recently, last month actually, released a quick start bundle for this, Mark, which I think is a fun little product because we said, it's such a big deal that rather than requiring people to dip their toe into a full-on platform, a value stream management platform, or any other broad speaking DevOps solution, what if we were to solve this particular problem with a quick purchase, something that would be able to be implemented in less than a month? It costs far less than a full-on platform, $25,000 or less to get started and be up and running in a month, having solved the problem of visibility, having solved the problem of scheduling and maintaining and understanding, availability of the test environments, of understanding configurations, knowing where they are, what's available, and what needs to be there in order to test completely, and then have a complete view of where everything is in every test environment. With the build analytics integrated into this, you can see every version of every application, the developer, the tester, what's going on, where's the status, how well it's doing relative to test completion and stability, etc., all with the reporting structure on the top, all available for 30 days, $25,000. So we thought that would be a big deal to help people really get started with test environment. The test environment quick start bundle, understand the bigger picture, and then you're off and running to a full digital transformation strategy, starting with test environment, which I think you would agree, Mark, is one of the largest problems that conspires against smooth, efficient development in the DevOps flow. Would you agree with that?
Well, sure. I mean, like I said, you can easily say 26%, 25%, or at least a quarter of your total process costs or something to do with this, and that's an area to attack, and you're going to get massive gains. So $25,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to the savings you're going to get very, very quickly in any typical enterprise.
Yeah. I mean, managing multi-million-dollar environments that's a transactional cost. We really are trying to to help people get a handle of this, because we do see this as a major bottleneck, and we've talked about it before as the Achilles heel in software development. Mm-hmm. Cody, I don't know if we have any other questions, but we have 5 minutes left to turn it back to you to handle the drawing.
Perfect. Yes, I'm also not seeing any questions on our end. So I'll go ahead and give the audience about another minute or so to submit any that they have while I read out these gift card winners. So quickly, this is for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. Our first winner is Otelia F. Our second winner is Diane D. Our third winner is Yarit K. And our fourth winner is Andre Y. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. And if you don't find an email, just check your spam folder. And I would also like to take this time to remind our audience that the session was recorded. Following the webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to access the on-demand recording, or you can find it living on the DevOps website. Just visit devops.com/webinars. So I did see one question that just came in last minute, so I'll go ahead and read it out loud. But they ask, anything on test as code in this context?
Sorry, I didn't catch the question. Test as I don't see the chat.
Test as code. Is
testing.
there anything test as code in this context?
Well, I mean, test environments as a service. I mean, setting up the test environment as code and having testing driving the test environment, because every test basically has effectively coded in it what the requirements are for testing from an environment point of view. So tying in setting up test environments from your code pipeline is certainly a very, very real thing, and it's an efficient way to do it. One of the other webinars we did earlier was talking about maturity of test environments, and certainly as you get more mature, you want to be able to drive your test environments from code. So together with the deployments and all the different test environment requirements, set it up as code. You might not start that way, but as you get more mature, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what it brings to mind anyway.
Okay.
All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and start closing out. So I would like to thank Marc Hornbeek and Bob Davis for being here with me today for putting together this presentation. Do you guys have any final remarks before we officially close things out?
Mark?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to participate. I hope everybody, has learned something, found the talk enjoyable, and we'll follow up with Bob and the team to, get going on improving your test environments.
Yes, I will second that. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Cody. Thank you, DevOps.com, and appreciate the audience for having been there. I do hope you got something out of it. Please visit our website at Plutora.com. There's plenty of resources up there. We've referenced the books. If you didn't get it here, you can download those on our website as well. So by all means, don't be a stranger. Let's talk about test environments and get you through that Achilles heel. All right. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bob, and thank you so much, Mark. I'd also like to thank Plutora for sponsoring today's webinar. And my final thanks, of course, goes to you, our audience. We appreciate you joining us today for this full hour presentation. Please take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you at a future TechStrong Learning webinar. This is Cody J. Brown signing off.
Thank you.